There's a particular kind of quiet that settles over a person in the evening, standing at the edge of their own lawn with a hose in their hand. The light turns gold, the sprinkler ticks, and you stand there, watering the same yellow patch you watered last night, and the night before that. You've been at this for weeks. 20 minutes after supper, soaking the pale spots, thinking, if I just give it enough, the green will come back. But it hasn't come back. Has it? It's still yellow. And I want you to hear this from someone who has been kneeling in the dirt for more years than he cares to count. That yellow is not thirst. Your lawn isn't asking for water, my friends. It's asking for something else entirely. Something so small you could hold a year's supply in one hand. Something that costs about $2. And you won't find it at the garden center. You'll find it at the pharmacy, on a shelf near the bandages and the cough syrup. But before I hand you the answer, I have to hand you the question, because there's a mistake buried in here. A quiet one. The kind that lifelong gardeners, good ones, careful ones, people who've been growing things since Eisenhower was in office, still make every summer. They buy the right cure for the wrong problem, and then they blame themselves when nothing happens. So today we're going to do this properly, slowly, the old way. First, I'll teach you to read what your grass has been telling you all summer, in a language most people never learn. Then I'll show you the powder. Then I'll be honest about when it works, when it doesn't, and the one time it does the very opposite of what you want. Pull up a chair, friend. Let's take our time. Let me start with the hardest question of the evening. What if all that watering hasn't just failed you? What if it's been quietly making things worse? I know. Nobody wants to hear that. I didn't want to hear it either. But here's what happens when water is the only tool we reach for. Water moves down through soil, and as it moves, it carries things with it. Nutrients dissolve and travel, down past the roots, out of reach, gone. Gardeners have a word for it. Leaching. Every extra soak washes a little more of the good away from where the grass can find it. And there's a second cost, quieter still. Grass that's watered lightly and often never learns to reach. The roots stay shallow, like a man who never leaves his own front porch. Then August arrives with a heat wave, and that grass has nothing in reserve. So how do you know? Truly know, whether your lawn is thirsty at all? Here's the old test. It costs nothing. It takes 10 seconds, and it has never once let me down. Walk across the lawn, then turn around and look behind you. If your footprints spring right back up, the grass is fine on water. Whatever's wrong out there, water isn't it? If they stay pressed flat, like tracks in fresh snow, then yes, that grass is genuinely thirsty, and it needs one long, deep drink, not 5 short ones. Go and do it tomorrow morning, before the sun gets high. But I'll tell you what I think you'll find. Most of you are coming back to tell me the grass sprang right up, which means the hose was never the answer, which means we have to ask a better question. Here's a question that sounds foolish, and isn't. It's the question everything else hangs on. What is green? Not grass is green, I mean. What is the green actually made of? It's made of one thing, a pigment called chlorophyll. It's what catches the sunlight and turns it into food. No chlorophyll, no green, no harvest of sunlight. And the plant slowly starves. Standing in full sun, in damp soil, starving anyway. Surrounded by everything it needs, unable to use one bit of it. So when your lawn turns yellow, that's what's happening down where you can't see. The grass has stopped building green. Now here's the part I love. If you forget everything else tonight, carry this one out the door with you. In 1915, a German chemist named Richard Willstetter was given the Nobel Prize for taking chlorophyll apart and finding out what was inside it, and right at the very center of it, holding the whole structure together, he found a single atom of one mineral, magnesium. One atom. That's the engine of green. That's the whole thing. And here's what gave me chills the first time I understood it properly. The molecule that makes a plant green is very nearly the same shape as the molecule that makes our blood red. The same ring. The only real difference is what sits at the center of it. In your blood, the center is iron. In a blade of grass, the center is magnesium. Green blood and red blood, built from almost the same blueprint. We are not so different from the lawn, my friends. We simply carry a different metal in our hearts. And when that one small thing goes missing, in a plant or in a person, everything above it starts to fade. So if green is chlorophyll, and chlorophyll is built around magnesium, what would make a lawn stop making it? There are 3 honest reasons. and only one of them is fixed with a hose. The first is thirst, but listen closely. Thirst turns grass brown and crisp, not yellow, and the footprints stay flat. That's a different looking trouble altogether. The second is nitrogen. Nitrogen is the raw material, the lumber. Without enough of it, the grass can't build chlorophyll fast enough to go around. That's what most fertilizer is for, and it's a real and common shortage. The third is magnesium, and this is the one that slips past us, year after year, because a lawn can have all the water in the world and all the nitrogen in the bag, a full truckload of lumber sitting in the driveway, and still have no way to finish the job. Magnesium isn't the lumber. It's the nail that holds it together. You can water a magnesium-hungry lawn every evening for a month. You can fertilize it until the bag is empty and your back is sore. It will stay yellow, because it was never short of what you kept giving it. And then there's the fourth reason, the one I almost never hear anybody mention, and it has embarrassed more experienced gardeners than will ever admit it out loud. A dull mower blade. A dull blade doesn't cut grass. It tears it, and a torn tip dries out and turns pale, whitish tan within a day or two. Multiply that by a few million blades, and the whole lawn takes on a hazy, sickly, yellowish cast, and you'd swear the thing was dying. So before you spend a single dollar, get down and look at the tips. If they're ragged and frayed, like the end of an old rope, your lawn doesn't need medicine. It needs a sharp blade, a free fix. And I've watched good people spend $50 before they found it. All right, now we come to the part that matters most. Here's the question I wish somebody had asked me 40 years ago. If your lawn could speak, which leaves would it speak from? Because it does speak. It has been speaking to you all summer long. And the whole secret, the one that separates a man who fixes his lawn this week from a man who keeps guessing for another 3 years, is knowing which leaves to listen to. This is the thing almost nobody tells you. So lean in. Magnesium can move inside the plant. Let that sit a moment, because it's a small fact. And it is beautiful, and it is the key to the whole business. When a grass plant runs short of magnesium, it does not split what little it has evenly among its leaves. It makes a decision. It pulls the magnesium back out of its own old, established leaves, the ones that have been standing there working the longest, and sends it up into the new growth, the tender young blades, the future. The old leaves go pale so the young ones can stay green. I don't know how that lands on you. I know how it lands on me. I have watched people do exactly the same thing for their children and their grandchildren, quietly, for years, without ever once announcing it. But here's what it means for you, standing out there with a $2 decision to make. If the yellowing is worst on the older, lower, outer leaves, that is the fingerprint of magnesium. And look closer still. Look at the pattern inside the blade. Magnesium hunger doesn't paint a blade one flat color. It leaves the veins green and drains the color from the strips in between. Fine green pinstripes running the length of a pale yellow blade, like an old suit jacket you haven't worn in years. Now hold that in your mind, and let me tell you about iron. Iron cannot move inside the plant. Once it's in a leaf, it stays put. So when a lawn runs short of iron, the old leaves stay perfectly green, and it's the newest blades that come up yellow, almost white, with green veins. Do you see what just happened there? Both of them look like yellow with green veins. Both of them get treated exactly the same way by 9 gardeners out of 10. But one shows up on the old growth, and one shows up on the new growth. And they need completely different answers. That, right there, is the mistake that even lifelong gardeners make. They see stripes, and they guess. So let me hand you the whole language. Plain and simple. Kneel down out there. Pull a few blades. Some old ones from low and to the outside. Some fresh ones from the newest growth in the middle. Hold them up to the light. Old leaves, evenly pale all over. That's nitrogen. Feed it. Old leaves, yellow between green veins. That's magnesium. That's our powder. Newest leaves, yellow or near white between green veins. That's iron, and it usually means your soil leans alkaline. Whole lawn brown and crisp, footprints staying flat. That's thirst. One deep drink. Ragged pale tips right after mowing. Sharpen the blade. Yellow in rings or patches instead of spread evenly. That's a different animal altogether. Disease, or grubs, or the neighbor's dog. Not a mineral problem at all. Write that on the back of an envelope and tape it inside the shed door. That envelope, my friends, is worth more than anything else I'm going to say tonight. So, you knelt down. You looked, and there they were, pinstripes on the old growth. Now let me tell you what to buy. But first let me tell you where it came from, because it's one of my favorite stories in all of gardening, and it's 400 years old. Go back to England. The year is 1618. There's a drought on, and a farmer named Henry Wicker is walking his cattle across the common at a little village called Epsom, looking for water. He finds a pool, and the cattle will not touch it. Now that's a strange thing. Thirsty animals in a drought, turning away from water. So Wicker tastes it himself. It's bitter, foul, but he notices something. That bitter water heals scratches. It soothes cracked skin. Word gets around, the way it does in a village. Within a generation, people are traveling from miles away to bathe in the bitter water of Epsom. It became one of the very first spa towns in England. And when they finally boiled that water down and looked at what was left in the bottom of the pan, it was a plain white crystal. Magnesium sulfate. Epsom salt. The cattle knew there was something in that water. It took us 400 years to work out that the very same something sits at the center of every green leaf on this earth. That white powder is about 1/10 magnesium by weight and about 1/8 sulfur. Both are things a plant genuinely needs, and a 2-pound bag costs around $2. Not in the garden aisle. Nobody thought to put it there. Look in the bath aisle, next to the bubble bath and the foot soaks, where it has sat quietly for 100 years, while all of us walked right past it on our way to the $40 bag of fertilizer. Here's a small thing that turned out to be a big thing. In all my years, I've almost never heard anybody mention it. Epsom salt is magnesium sulfate. Everybody talks about the magnesium. Nobody talks about the sulfate, and that's a shame, because sulfur has quietly become one of the most overlooked shortages in American soil. Here's why, and it will surprise you. 2 generations ago, our air was dirty. The smokestacks put sulfur up into the sky, and the rain brought it back down. It fell on our fields and our lawns, and it fed them. Whether we knew it or not, nobody planned it, nobody paid for it. It simply fell out of the sky. Then we cleaned the air. And thank God we did. But when the sulfur stopped falling, an awful lot of soil that had been getting a free feeding for a century quietly stopped getting it. And nobody sent a notice. So when you scatter this white powder, you're not handing your grass one gift. You're handing it two: the magnesium, to build the green, and the sulfur, to help it use the nitrogen it already has. It's the sort of thing you only notice if you've been paying attention a very long time. All right, enough talk. Let's put it to work. I'll give you 2 ways. One is faster. One is kinder to the back. Neither one asks you to bend over more than once. The first way, the gentle spray. 2 tablespoons of Epsom salt into 1 gallon of warm water. Warm, not hot. Straight from the tap is plenty. Stir until the water runs clear and you can't feel a single crystal at the bottom of the jug. Pour it into a pump sprayer. Walk the lawn slowly and mist it evenly, the way you'd water a seedling. Not the way you'd wash a car. 1 gallon covers about 200 square feet. For most front lawns, 4 or 5 gallons does the whole thing. Do it early in the morning or in the cool of the evening. Never in the middle of a hot afternoon. A wet leaf under a hard sun can scorch, and there's no need to hurry. Why spray? Because the leaf itself takes magnesium indirectly, through its own surface. You're not waiting for the soil to deliver the mail. You're handing the letter straight to the plant. The second way, the quiet scatter. This is the lazy man's method, and I'll be honest with you. At my age, I use it more often than the other one. 2 pounds of Epsom salt for every 1,000 square feet of lawn. And if that number means nothing to you, here's the kitchen version. 1,000 square feet is roughly 10 of your paces by 10 of your paces. A 2-pound bag will cover about that. Scatter it by hand, the way you'd feed chickens, or run it through a spreader on a low setting and walk it twice. Once north to south, once east to west, so you don't leave stripes. Then water it in lightly, just enough to melt the crystals down into the ground. It takes a few days longer to show, but it feeds the soil rather than the leaf. And what the soil takes hold of, it holds a good deal longer. So which do you choose? If the lawn looks poorly and you'd like to see something this week, spray it. If you're a patient sort, and if you've stayed with me this long, I suspect you are, scatter it and let the next rain do the rest. What do I actually do? I spray first, for my own peace of mind. Then I scatter a week later, for the lawns. Let me set your expectations honestly, because I would far rather you be pleasantly surprised than quietly disappointed. The first 2 or 3 days, you'll see nothing. Nothing at all. And this is exactly where most people decide it didn't work and go back to the hose. Don't. Inside the leaf, the plant is doing precisely what you asked. It simply has no way of telling you yet. By day 3 to 5, something shifts. It's subtle. The yellow doesn't so much leave as it lifts. The lawn stops looking sick before it starts looking green. Your wife won't notice. You will, because you've been watching. By day 5 to 7, the pinstripes fade. The old leaves come back. That's the morning to stand at the window with your coffee and just look out for a minute. That's your lawn saying thank you. By day 10 to 14, if you scattered as well as sprayed, the deeper color settles in. Less like paint, more like health. And it will hold, provided the ground was truly short of magnesium. Which brings me to the part where I have to be straight with you. This is the point in the video where I could sell you something. I'm not going to. Epsom salt is not magic. There's a soil scientist out at Washington State University who has spent years working through the claims people make about Epsom salt in the garden, and she'll tell you plainly that most of them don't hold up. And she's right. Not because magnesium doesn't matter. It matters enormously. But because a great many soils already have plenty of it. I don't find that discouraging. I find it freeing. Because here's what it means. You cannot buy your way to a green lawn. You can only diagnose your way there. If your ground already holds enough magnesium, adding more does nothing. The grass takes what it needs and lets the rest wash through. You cannot overdose a lawn on greenness. There's no such thing. Where this powder does work, and works beautifully, is in soils that lose magnesium easily. Sandy ground that lets everything run straight through. Sour, acidic ground. Places where it rains hard and often, washing the goodness down and away, year after year. Much of the Southeast. Much of the Pacific Northwest. The sandy pockets of the Northeast. And there's exactly one way to know for certain. It's the best $15 or $20 you'll ever spend on your yard. A soil test. From your county extension office. They'll send you a small box. You put a few scoops of your own dirt in it and mail it back. A couple of weeks later, a piece of paper comes home telling you precisely what your ground has, and precisely what it's missing. Magnesium included. I've been gardening a very long time, my friends. Nothing I have ever bought has taught me half as much as that little box. Guessing is expensive. Knowing is cheap. Now, some of you are going to do every bit of this right. The lawn will come back green, and you'll stand there looking at it, thinking, it's green, but it isn't that green. Let's talk about that, because there's a common mistake buried inside it. That deep, dark, almost blue-green you're picturing. The golf course green. The green that makes a man slow his car down. Usually isn't magnesium at all. That's iron. Iron helps the plant assemble chlorophyll, and it turns the color up in a hurry. Which is exactly why so many lawn greening products in the fancy bottles are really just iron, wearing a suit. But understand what iron is doing. Iron colors your grass. It doesn't feed it. It's makeup, not a meal. And it fades in a few weeks. Magnesium is the meal. Iron is the makeup. Take the meal first. And if you do add iron, choose it carefully. Because this is where good people get burned. Iron sulfate, the cheap kind, ferrous sulfate, will stain your driveway, your pavers, your brick, the toes of your shoes, the white siding on the house. And those rust orange marks don't come off with a hose and a prayer. Ask me how I know. It also has a habit of locking itself up in alkaline soil. The very soil where iron shortage is most common. So the folks who need it most get the least out of it. Chelated iron costs a bit more, but it stays available even in sweet, chalky ground. And it's far kinder to concrete. Use it lightly. Follow the label. Keep it off the hard surfaces. But hold on to the order of things. Magnesium builds the green. Iron only brightens it. Now some cautions, because I'd rather you went slowly and got it right. Don't exceed the rate. 2 tablespoons per gallon. 2 pounds per 1,000 square feet. Doubling it won't double your results. It will only leave too much magnesium in the soil, and too much magnesium crowds out calcium. Calcium is what stiffens the cell walls and keeps the blades standing up straight. Too much magnesium, too little calcium, and you get soft, floppy grass that disease takes an unwelcome interest in. Don't spread it where it isn't needed. Some heavy clays and soils born from old volcanic rock already carry plenty. Adding more won't help and may quietly hurt. This is what the soil test is for. Don't give the ground more than it can use. Epsom salt dissolves, and what dissolves travels. Whatever the grass doesn't take up, the rain carries off into the ditch and down to the creek. A little, where it's needed, is medicine. A lot, where it isn't, is pollution. Mind the dog. Some dogs will lick at a salty lawn out of curiosity. A small amount won't do serious harm, but a mouthful will give a dog an unhappy afternoon and you an unhappy evening. Keep them off until you've watered it in. And remember, Epsom salt is a visitor, not a resident. If your ground is chronically short of magnesium, you'll be doing this again in 6 weeks, and again after that. And that gets tiresome. Which brings me to the fix that actually lasts. If your soil test comes back saying 2 things, low in magnesium and sour, acidic ground, then there is an older, slower, better answer. Dolomitic lime. It's ground up rock, and it does 3 things at once. It releases magnesium slowly, over months, instead of all at once. It brings calcium along with it, so you never create the imbalance we just talked about. And it sweetens acid soil back toward the range where grass actually wants to live. It won't give you a result in 5 days. It'll give you a result in 5 months, and then keep on giving it, quietly, for years. Epsom salt is the visit to the doctor. Lime is the change in how you live. And while we're being honest, you may have heard that a box of baking soda will sweeten sour soil. It won't. Baking soda is sodium, and sodium is hard on soil. It breaks down the crumb structure and packs the ground tight. Save the baking soda for the biscuits. Lime is the honest answer. Here's the rhythm of the whole thing. For those of you who like a plan pinned up on the wall of the shed. In spring, once the ground has warmed, feed the lawn properly, and sharpen that mower blade before the first cut. Not after, before. In late spring, kneel down and read the blades. Old growth pale and pinstriped? That's your window. In early summer, if the reading says magnesium, spray it, then scatter a week later. Through high summer, water deeply and rarely. Let the roots go looking. Make them reach. That's a lesson worth learning in more places than the lawn, and I'll leave it there. In autumn, if the soil test asked for it, put down dolomitic lime and let the winter work it in. Autumn is the season of quiet, invisible progress. My favorite kind. And that's the whole year. $2 for the powder. 15 or 20 for the soil test. Maybe 15 more for lime, if your ground asks for it. Call it $40 or $50. I've watched neighbors pay $800 a year for a truck to pull up 4 times and spray something out of a tank nobody's allowed to ask about. I'm not here to tell any man how to spend his money, only to tell you that you don't have to. Let me leave you with the thing I actually wanted to say tonight. Your lawn was never shouting at you. It was whispering, patiently, all summer long, in a language of pale stripes on old leaves. The oldest leaves giving up their own color so the young ones could stay green. And we missed it, because we were busy pouring water on a problem that was never about water at all. I think that's how a great deal of trouble works, my friends. And not only in the yard. The loudest solution is so rarely the right one. And the thing that's actually missing is usually small. Far smaller than we expect. Quiet. Easy to walk past. It takes a bit of kneeling down, and a bit of looking closely, before you find it. But you can find it. That's the whole point of tonight. You can find it. So here's what I'd like you to do. Go outside tomorrow morning, while the dew is still on the grass. Kneel down. Take your time getting down, and take your time getting back up. I know exactly how it goes. Pull one old blade from low and out at the edge. Pull one young blade from the newest growth. Hold them up to the light, side by side. Then come back and tell me in the comments what you saw. Were the old leaves striped? The new ones pale? The tips ragged? Did your footprints stay flat? And while you're down there in the comments, tell me about the garden you grew up beside, your mother's beds, your grandfather's back lawn. The trick somebody in your family swore by and passed along without ever explaining why. I read those. Every one. They're the best part of my week. Tell me, and I'll do my level best to answer. Because I learn as much from you as you ever learn from me. That's how it's always worked among gardeners, and I hope it always will. And if you know somebody who's been standing out there with a hose, night after night, watering a lawn that simply will not listen, send them this. They don't need more water, my friends. They just need somebody to teach them how to read. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your soil, and I'll see you out in the garden.